All right, all right. Welcome, 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 welcome. I'm so glad to be with you today for another exciting edition of The Defiant Lawyer. So, what we're going to talk about, or what I'm going to talk about today, as you can see, it's just me. I'm riding shotgun today. Chloe and I are getting ready for a huge trial coming up Monday. So she is in deep preparation, and I told her I would go by myself. So it's all me today, but it's going to be a lot shorter, okay? It's going to be a lot shorter. And here's what we're going to talk about. Here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm so used to saying we, but here's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about criminalizing education and unionizing Amazon. Just a couple of things I want to share with you today in this edition of The Defiant Lawyers. Hang around, see what I got to say. I guarantee you it's going to be interesting.
That Corbin and Corbett legal team fighting for the rights of the people. That father-daughter team investing in the youth when the system ain't treating them equal. Providing truth for our people, we able to reach them. So anytime you get accused for a crime and Lord knows you ain't do it, we here to get you through it. Exemplifying prudence and glorifying God, making sure you're compensated for other people's doings. Our vision is to be one of the best. We're small enough to focus on your matter throughout the neighborhoods of Dallas. Working constantly and making sure your rights are protected. A firm team of lawyers, aggressive, effective. The team that has your back in the courtroom. Two well-spoken black lawyers in the courtroom. Investing time and resources when it's evident that you were treated wrong. Now you walking out of Dallas courtroom with a settlement. Corbin and Corbett, the father-daughter legal tag team that has your back in the courtroom. Our purpose is simple. To obtain a favorable outcome for each client and glorify Christ in all we do. Our vision is to be one of the best and most...
All right, welcome back. So yes, I want to talk to you briefly about criminalizing education and unionizing Amazon. All right, so again, I'd like to welcome all you legal rebels. I am Attorney Augustus Corbett, one half of the Defiant Lawyers. Each and every Saturday, we provide legal analysis of trending politics, policies, personalities, and pop culture to empower you with the information you need to defy this unjust legal system. Go ahead and subscribe, like, and share. All right. What do I mean by criminalizing education? Well, I mean just that. There is an effort afoot in this country to criminalize education. That is, to use the legal system against teachers for teaching, most especially, critical race theory. And that is my focus today. And there's also an effort to prosecute folks who teach any kind of gender education, sex education in school. Okay. Now, I don't have a lot to say about that, except that I do not believe teachers should be prosecuted for teaching gender, sex education. And I don't believe teachers ought to be prosecuted or the legal system used against them for teaching critical race theory. I mean, it is just really crazy what's going on right now in our country. And so, let's talk about it. And also, I think this is very appropriate because this is the Teachers Appreciation Week. All right. So we appreciate teachers, although I have written a book, and my book brings out how good teachers are really good for students and bad teachers are really bad for students. All right. So I'm going to talk about that in a few moments. But let's turn our attention to the state of Georgia. The state of Georgia. And I want to introduce you to a person. I want to talk to you about someone who is, in my opinion, just off the deep end. I mean, he's just gone off the deep end. I don't know this gentleman. His name is John Gordon. He is running for the Attorney General office in the state of Georgia. He is Trump endorsed, so that tells you a lot there. So he's got to do, or he is in his heart to do everything he can to try to attract that MAGA vote, that Trump vote. And so these folks are just going again, to the far right, to the extreme in trying to bring in that vote. And I want to call your attention to a couple of things that he said he would do if he ends up being the AG of the state of Georgia. Quote, and it's right here on the screen, you see it. He says, I want to protect our children. We are not going to allow educators to indoctrinate our children on critical race theory. If they attempt to do so, I will seek an injunction against them. All I can say is this is total, absolute absurdity. It is foolishness. And I say that because of the way the GOP, the far right, has just mischaracterized what critical race theory is. I guarantee you, I was a teacher for a while. I guarantee you teachers are not teaching critical race theory in school. Most of them have never heard the term until here recently. Because the GOP, and I'm going to introduce you to the person who is responsible for making this subject, the subject of critical race theory, such a hot topic. I'm going to introduce you to that person in just a moment. But that's not all that John Gordon said. He also said, quote, we will also protect children by prosecuting as child abusers. Yes, he said it. Anyone who dares teach gender identity without the involvement of the parents and the family doctor, anybody under 18 that they counsel on gender identity, we're going to prosecute them. Now, with critical race theory, he said they were going to seek an injunction. By the way, an injunction is what you get if you go to court, you ask a judge simply to stop someone from taking some action. So the injunction is not a criminal thing. You're not going to get in criminal trouble. He would not seek to throw a teacher in jail, to prosecute that teacher, but only to stop that teacher from teaching critical race theory. But with gender identity, he says that if he became Attorney General of the state of Georgia, he would seek to prosecute teachers as child abusers if they teach gender identity. Now, in full disclosure, I don't believe gender identity should be taught in school either. I don't. I would, when my kids were in school, something that sensitive, I would want to be able to teach them that myself, my wife and I. I wouldn't want a teacher who I don't know her or his religious beliefs, their morals. I wouldn't want them teaching my children about that. We'll do that at home. We'll do that at church. That said, I don't believe that such a teacher should be prosecuted. I mean, prosecuted, which means they could go to jail and even prison, depending on what the criminal offense would be. If it's a felony offense, they could go to prison. That's taking it too far. Again, I agree. Let's not teach that sort of thing in school, especially not to small children, grade school children, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade. Let the parents do that at home. But at the same time, there is no point in prosecuting a teacher for teaching that. There are other ways to deal with that. There are other ways to prevent or prohibit teachers from teaching sexual identity in school. Prosecuting them is just going way, way, way overboard. Way overboard. And with critical race theory, once again, most teachers don't even know what critical race theory is. I guarantee you that. I heard about critical race theory for the first time in 2001, my first year of law school. That's when I heard about critical race theory. And I'm an African American who had studied a lot of, Black history and a lot of issues related to the Black community. I was pretty active in that sort of thing. I've always been what you would call woke or conscience. But even I had not heard about critical race theory until I entered law school in 2001. So I know a teacher is not learning critical race theory in college or even at the master's level degree. I don't think so, because it's a legal doctrine. It's a doctrine that was invented, and I'm going to show you who pretty much started this whole thing of critical race theory. All right. But what I want to do now is introduce you to the person who has politicized and mischaracterized critical race theory. His name is Christopher Rufo. And Mr. Rufo tweeted March 15, 2021. He says, "We have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions." See, there it is right there. It was his goal, and he single-handedly did this. It was his goal with the help of Fox News, with the help of the GOP, with the help of conservatives, Black and white conservatives, by the way, primarily white conservatives and evangelicals, but Blacks as well. It was his goal to use critical race theory as the boogeyman, to do just what he said, to drive up negative perceptions about critical race theory. And he goes on to say, "We will eventually turn it toxic." And hasn't he done that? So now critical race theory is completely toxic, especially where the white community is concerned. And so now everything they blame on critical race theory, everything. To teach about slavery in high school, that's critical race theory. To teach about the Jim Crow system in high school, that's critical race theory. To talk about Martin Luther King, that's critical race theory. To talk about racial equality, that's critical race theory. This guy has taken this critical race theory moniker and he's done exactly what he set out to do. He's made it toxic and he has created negative perception about it. He goes on to say, "We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all of the various cultural insanities under that brand category." So like I was just saying, everything, all the cultural war, all the cultural battles, all of it, they are now putting it under critical race theory. And the average white person out here who is showing up at school board meetings, who are voting for these crazy candidates based on critical race theory, they don't even know what it is. All they know and what they've heard from Fox News is this guy's efforts to make critical race theory the boogeyman, the devil. And it's not. That is not what it is. Now, I did a video, several videos, in fact, explaining exactly what critical race theory is. So go to the channel and just search among our videos for critical race theory, and I go into what it is. All right? So that you'll know. Don't be listening to these folks about what critical race theory is. Do your own research. Do your own research. Now, these two law professors, the late Professor Derek Bell, is really the man or the person who created critical race theory. He's considered the father of critical race theory. And Professor Kimberly Crenshaw, she is still a professor, law professor today. She is also a co-creator of critical race theory. And she's on the speaking circuit and so forth. Look her up, and she too will explain what critical race theory is and why it has been, or how it has been, mischaracterized by the right, by Chris Rufo. This guy. This is the guy who did this. He didn't do it by himself, but he led the effort. He led the effort. And you need to educate yourself about critical race theory. It has been forced upon you, if you will. It has been introduced in a very toxic way, in a very negative way, into the American psyche. And it does not mean anything like they have made it to mean at all. Now, what I suggest you do is, again, do your own research on this. Here are a few books that I recommend you get. All right. So the first book here that you see, Critical Race Theory, this is a compilation of many authors who are writing on critical race theory. Okay. And then the second book, Critical Race Theory by Richard Delgado, is an excellent book that explains what it is. Mr. Delgado, he's also a law professor. Because remember, again, critical race theory is pretty much something that was taught and discussed only at law schools. So when you studied critical race theory, you're going to find a lot of law professors, a lot of attorneys, a lot of civil rights lawyers, and because those are the people who developed this, and those are the people who talked about it and wrote about it. Again, not something that you would see in public education, not at all. That's a mischaracterization, and it's what Christopher Rufo did, essentially to scare the average white person and to trick the average black conservative. Okay, I mean, I'm known to just speak up front, so I might as well continue. No point in me getting shy now. So, Critical Race Theory, the second book there by Richard Delgado. And then the other book is not necessarily, the third book is not necessarily on critical race theory, but it's a very good book that deals with the topics of critical race theory. And this book is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Great book. And his other books are great as well. And then the fourth book, this book looks familiar. Education and Justice, How Public Schools Fail African-American Males. And, whoa, that's written by me. Yes, Augustus Corbett. I wrote that book. Actually, I wrote it in 2006. I updated it in 2016. We will probably do a third edition of this book because it is as relevant as when I wrote it, 16 years ago now. I mean, the subject and the topic of public education is so critical. It is so important that we got to continue to keep putting this information out there so as to educate, to equip, and to empower you so that rights will not be taken from us without knowing it. Now, again, this is Teachers Appreciation Week. We do appreciate teachers, by all means. But one of the things I talk about in my book is how in predominantly African American communities, the teachers with the lower scores, in other words, the less qualified teachers tend to end up in the schools that serve African American communities. So you need to, the average African American parent doesn't know that. But I cover in my book a whole chapter entitled Teachers and Black Boys, because the average teacher is a white female. And that doesn't mean that all white female teachers are bad teachers. I actually had some very good white female teachers, to be honest. But like 8 out of 10 teachers that your African-American child will have will be white females, and there is a cultural divide between, the average white female teacher and the black student. And because there's that cultural divide, there are also going to be certain biases. Sometimes some of the teachers are just blatantly racist. Some are kind of passive racist. And the result of either the biases or the racial prejudice or the cultural gap is that black male students are doing very, very poorly in public schools. All right. So I talk about it in this book. And so if you have a black male student in school, you need to get it. You need to get this book. It's available on Amazon. You also can get this book on our website, Education and Justice. So what am I saying here before I move on to Amazon? I'm saying here that this guy, Christopher Rufo, has successfully demonized, mischaracterized critical race theory. And politicians like this guy is now using that politicization and that mischaracterization of critical race theory to get elected to office. And they're not just, when they get elected, they're not just sitting back doing nothing once they get elected. They're actually passing laws. They're actually passing laws that are dialing back very critical, very important civil rights that we have fought hard for over the years. I mean, we have people who've literally died and shed their blood, gave their lives for the rights that people like John Gordon are trying to take. People like Chris Rufo are trying to take from us. And how are they doing it? Because how are they doing it? They're strategically using and mischaracterizing concepts like critical race theory to scare people, to scare white people, and to trick and deceive many black people. And I throw black people in here because I have heard some black people say some just uninformed things about critical race theory. They are just basically quoting what they're hearing from Christopher Rufo and his team of people who are mischaracterizing critical race theory. I guarantee you that a lot of these people who are out here saying things about critical race theory, even writing books about critical race theory, have never really studied what critical race theory is. And if they do read it, a lot of them don't understand it, or they twist it, mischaracterize it. Again, go to our channel, just do a search in our videos. I've done several on what critical race theory is so that you won't be tricked and deceived. Okay? Now, moving on. Amazon. Now, several weeks ago, we did a video. Chloe, my daughter, did a video specifically on how Amazon is being unionized. and she introduced us to a young African-American male from the New Jersey, New York area who successfully unionized one of the warehouses, one of the Amazon warehouses. I've been so impressed with this young brother. He's out here, he's getting it done. And let me tell you, I believe in unions. I grew up in the home of a hard-working African-American father. My dad worked hard. My dad was out of the house most days, 6 days out of the week, at about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, headed to work. Didn't get home every day until about 6 o'clock in the evening, working hard every single day. And I mean, he was a laborer. He wasn't sitting behind a desk. He worked most of his life outside, okay? And he made a little bit of money. Didn't make a lot of money, but he used that money to raise us, to keep a roof over our heads. And, you know, my father never made, all his life, never made over $8 an hour. He only had a third grade education. And he was in the South. He was a Southerner. So he had lived through Jim Crow and so forth. And he basically had to do whatever his employer said because there were no unions back then, especially. So because of my father, and then the same is true with my father-in-law. Both of them are passed, but these men worked hard outside every day, 30, 40 years to put food on the table, to take care of us, take care of their families. And there were no unions. So they pretty much had to do whatever their employer said. So I kind of see things through the eyes of the small guy, of the little man, of the working man, because of my father. You know, Tom Brokaw, the former anchor for NBC News, wrote a book entitled The Greatest Generation. And he was talking about that World War II generation, and he was primarily talking about white men. Well, I take such an issue with that book because the greatest generation was that generation of African-American men, both in the South, in the North, who had to deal with segregation, had to deal with racism, had to deal with Jim Crow, yet they still had to go to work. They still had to make money to take care of their families. They kept their heads down. They did what they had to do for their families. That's the greatest generation. That's the greatest generation. So when I see a young man, like the young man that I'm getting ready to show this video clip about, who stood up to Amazon and got a warehouse unionized, an Amazon warehouse. I mean, he stood up. This little guy stood up against Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, several hundred billions of dollars, doing everything it can to keep a union out of Amazon. And we all love Amazon, right? I mean, I have a book with Amazon. I mean, we love the fact that we can go on Amazon's website and order something and have it by the end of the day. I mean, that is great. But what we know now is the people who are behind the scenes in those warehouses are just sacrificing, I mean, life almost to make that happen, while they make a small amount of money, and Jeff Bezos and the other shareholders of Amazon make lots and lots and lots of money. So there was a hearing here recently. Senator Lindsey Graham had some comments to say about the hearing that I think Bernie Sanders oversaw. And this young brother was one of the people that the Senate invited to come and speak. And as you'll see, he's just a regular dude. I mean, he's not a suit wearing, educated, Harvard trained lawyer or any of that. He's just a regular dude. And he beat Jeff Bezos and Amazon. I'm proud of this dude. And so we talked about him a few weeks ago, but I want to update the story. I want to show you just a brief clip of what happened in this Senate meeting. All right. Just a second.
At the ballot box, and it will be, if we take this body back, this demonization of individual companies that are subject to the law will cease. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to address Mr. Graham. First off, it sounded like you was talking about more of the companies and the businesses in your speech, but you forgot that the people are the ones who make these companies operate. And if we're not protected, and if the process for when we hold these companies accountable is not working for us, then that's the reason why we're here today. That's the reason why I'm here to represent the workers who make these companies go. And I think that it's in your best interest to realize that it's not a left or a right thing. It's not a Democrat or a Republican thing. It's a workers thing. It's a workers issue. And we're the ones that are suffering in the corporations that you're talking about, in the businesses that you're talking about, in the warehouses that you're talking about. So that's the reason why I think I was invited today to speak on that behalf. And you should listen, because we do represent your constituents as well. So just take that into consideration, that the people are the ones that make these corporations go. It's not the other way around.
Wow. 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 That brother deserves an applause. He deserves an applause. Here we go. I mean, really. This brother stood up to Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the country. And in this clip you just saw, he stood up to Lindsey Graham. Didn't bite his tongue, didn't drop his head, didn't get irate, wasn't angry. He just reminded Senator Graham that it's the people that make up this corporation. It's working people who get up every day. And I've heard him explain that the people in the warehouses work 10 to 12 hours a day. And some of them have a commute that's an hour to 3 hours long. They get a 30-minute lunch break and two 15-minute breaks for their 10 to 12-hour shifts. They are the ones who are making Amazon all that money. As a matter of fact, when Jeff Bezos, when his company, whatever it's called, successfully went into space, when he got out, when he came back and got out of the spacecraft, he thanked Amazon for making that happen, for making that possible. Well, that is true. It is the Amazon employees who make Jeff Bezos, Jeff Bezos. And so to hear Senator Graham sit there and say all that stuff, and he said a whole lot more about corporations and businesses, and you see how protective he is of those businesses and corporations and could care less about the workers. This brother reminded him the corporations wouldn't be anything without the workers. So it's time to put the hard-working people at the top of the priority list, and not the Jeff Bezos of the world. They're doing very fine. And I'm not anti-capitalist. I'm none of that. No, I believe in capitalism. I'm not a socialist. Not at all. But I know, grew up under, lived with, in the home of a hardworking man. And when I say hardworking, I mean hardworking. And he taught me to work hard. I used to work with my father in construction. My dad and I, my brother, we used to go, we build houses together. My brother was a brick mason. My father was his helper, and I was their helper as well. So I was 12, 13 years old, 14 years old, probably violated some child labor laws or something. But they had me out there as a young kid. And before I started doing that work, I was in the fields of North Carolina cropping tobacco. I mean, I'm from the South. I'm a country boy. So I grew up around hardworking people. And back then, there were no unions for the most part. And if they were, they weren't for blacks. The white men could get in the unions. The white men could benefit from the unions. But hardworking black men, no, they were excluded from unions. So to see this young man take on these powerful people, this young black man take on these powerful people, it just does my heart good. So keep up with this young brother. He's doing a great job there with unionizing Amazon. And I just wanted to give you an update on that case. All right, so this is about going to wrap it up for us. Like I said, Chloe and I are preparing for a huge trial that's coming up Monday. I thought I would get up here because we want to remain, consistent with our broadcast schedule. Okay. And so every Saturday we're going to be here talking about matters that are relevant to the African American community. Social justice, civil rights matters that are relevant to our community. So listen, share, like, subscribe our channel. I don't think there's another channel out there that's doing what we're doing. So help us out. Get the word out. Get the word out. All right. That is going to do it for us today. I really appreciate you all tuning in. And let me put these books back on the screen for you. Make sure you grab yourself a copy of all of these books, every one of them, so that you can be informed when people start spitting foolishness about critical race theory. Critical race theory was designed to help us, to help African Americans. And that's why it's being so attacked today. Okay? So educate yourself on it, what it means. Here are some books here that would help you. All right? I am out. Thank you for tuning in. Peace. See you next week.